The most dangerous thing about manipulation isn't that someone tries to control you. The real danger is that you don't even notice when you start living by someone else's rules. You think you're just answering a question, but somehow you end up defending yourself. You're just explaining something and suddenly you feel guilty. You're simply talking, but deep down, you already feel smaller. Manipulation doesn't always look rough or cruel. It's not necessarily about anger or deceit. Most often, it's about someone's need to keep control without losing face. And what's interesting is that people who manipulate don't always realize they're doing it. They use old communication patterns, guilt, subtle pressure, hints, because that's what makes them feel safe. That's exactly why it's so important to recognize what's happening, so you don't get pulled into the game. A manipulator rarely speaks directly. They ask questions that already contain an accusation. Why did you do that? Sounds like curiosity, but hidden inside is the idea that you did something wrong. Or they might ask, do you think you're better than everyone else? It sounds like a question, but whichever way you answer, it diminishes you. That's the essence of manipulation. You're put in a situation where every word feels like a wrong move. You start defending, explaining, arguing, and from that moment on, you're already inside a scenario that wasn't written by you. The main defense against manipulation is simple. Don't respond automatically. Manipulation feeds on your reaction. If you can pause for a moment, if you can notice that the other person is trying to pull you into an emotional response, you've already won half the battle. Real strength lies in changing the rhythm of the conversation. Don't rush to explain or justify yourself. Return the responsibility for meaning to the person who's speaking. For example, when someone says, "Why are you acting like this?" you can calmly respond, "What exactly about my behavior is bothering you?" You're not defending yourself. You're clarifying. And by doing that, you bring the conversation back to reality. Here's a simple example. A woman says, "I come home," and my husband says, "You bought some nonsense again? Don't you have better things to spend money on?" Her first reaction is to flare up, to defend, to prove that her purchase was necessary. But if you look at the situation through the lens of communication, you can act differently. Instead of defending, ask a calm question. Are you talking about money, or does it bother you that I made a decision without discussing it with you? In that moment, the tone of the conversation changes completely. The manipulation loses its fuel. You're not arguing. You're shifting the conversation to a deeper level, to the level of meaning. The other person is forced to step out of the role of accuser because you're not stepping into the role of victim. From a communication perspective, this is what makes you free. When you stop reacting automatically, you regain your choice. A manipulator can't continue if you're not defending or attacking. They lose control of the rhythm, and the conversation becomes more honest. Because manipulation is always an attempt to control someone else's emotions. Conscious communication, on the other hand, is about taking that control back, but without aggression. It's important to understand that fighting a manipulator is pointless. A fight means you've already stepped into their script. They don't want a resolution, they want your reaction. That's why the best strategy is clarity and calm. Not indifference, but inner stability. You can even use a touch of humor. Not sarcasm, but lightness. The kind of soft curiosity that shows you see what's happening, but you're not falling into it. When you can smile and say, "That's interesting. What do you mean by that?" the manipulator loses their ground. Manipulation can only exist where there's tension. Calmness is the oxygen it can't survive without. Talking to a manipulator isn't a fight. It's a dance of attention. You need to listen not just to the words, but to the motive behind them. When someone says, "You've changed," it often means, "I'm afraid you're stepping out of the role I'm used to seeing you in." And when they say, "You don't understand me," it's not always a reproach. Sometimes it's really a plea. "Please understand me, but don't abandon me." When you start hearing that, you stop seeing manipulation as an attack and start recognizing it as a clumsy attempt to express fear or weakness. And in that moment, the conversation stops being a battlefield. The most important thing, from a communication point of view, is to stay connected with yourself. Don't let someone else's words control your emotional state. Don't match their tempo, don't swallow guilt, and don't try to prove that you're good. Conscious communication begins when you stop playing the role of "I have to" and start being real. You don't need to win. You just need not to lose yourself. Talking to a manipulator is like standing in the wind. If you resist too much, you'll get tired. But if you just stand still, feeling your feet on the ground, the wind will pass. You can be flexible, but with roots, strong, but without aggression. That's what mature communication is. When you hear, see, understand, but you don't give away control of yourself. It's not coldness, it's presence. And that's when the conversation stops being a struggle and becomes a space where you remain yourself. And there's one more important thing to remember. Manipulators rely on confusion. The more you doubt yourself, the easier it is for them to steer the direction of the talk. That's why self-awareness is your best protection. When you know what you feel and why you feel it, it's much harder for someone to twist that against you. Before reacting, ask yourself a simple question. What's actually happening right now? Am I being attacked, or am I just feeling uncomfortable because of someone else's tone? That pause gives you perspective. You step outside the emotional fog and start seeing what's real. Most manipulation dissolves the moment you bring awareness to it. It's also worth noticing your body in these moments. Manipulative conversations often have a physical signature, a tight chest, a clenched jaw, shallow breathing. Your body always reacts first. If you can catch that, you can stay present. Take a slow breath, relax your shoulders, and remind yourself, I have time. I don't need to rush this answer. That's not a trick. That's grounding. It brings you back to yourself, and from that state, you speak differently. Your tone changes, your eyes steady, and the manipulator feels it. They may not understand it consciously, but they sense they've lost control. Another key idea. Not every manipulator is malicious. Sometimes it's just people who learned unhealthy ways to connect. Maybe they grew up in a family where guilt or pressure were normal. For them, manipulation is communication.